Why is NBA great Tim Duncan so underrated? Is it possible for a player to be the greatest ever in his position and be heavily underrated at the same time? I think it's possible, especially with a player like Tim Duncan. From swimming to basketball. Born in 1976 on the U.S. Virgin Islands, Tim Duncan dreamed to be a professional swimmer like his older sister, and the grand plan was to participate in the freestyle events in the '92 Olympics in Barcelona. In 1989, after Hurricane Hugo destroyed the island's only Olympic-sized swimming pool, Duncan was forced to swim in the ocean instead, and his fear of sharks ruined his enthusiasm for the sport. He was dealt another emotional blow when his mother died of breast cancer one day before his 14th birthday. On her deathbed, she made Duncan and his sisters promise that they would graduate from college, going a long way in explaining Duncan's later refusal to leave college early for the NBA. Early career. Duncan was awkward and raw at first and struggled with early transition problems and was even held scoreless in his first college game, but he was also a quick learner. As the year progressed, he and teammate Randolph Childress led the Deacons to a 20-11 win-loss record. Duncan's style of play was simple yet effective, combining an array of low-post moves, mid-range bank shots, and tough defense. He was chosen to represent the U.S. in the 1994 Goodwill Games. Meanwhile, Duncan worked towards a degree in psychology and also took classes in anthropology and Chinese literature. The Twin Towers. In the 1997 NBA draft, the San Antonio Spurs drafted Duncan with the first draft pick. The Spurs were coming off an injury-riddled 1996-97 season, and their best player, David Robinson, was sidelined for most of the year, and they had finished with a 20-62 win-loss record. In the 1997-98 season, Duncan and Robinson became known as the Twin Towers. The duo earned a reputation for their exceptional defense close to the basket. From the beginning, Duncan established himself as a quality player. In his second road game, he grabbed 22 rebounds against opposing Chicago Bulls Hall of Fame power forward Dennis Rodman, a multiple rebounding champion and NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Duncan lived up to expectations of being the #1 draft pick, starting in all 82 regular season games, averaging 21.1 points, 11.9 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and 2.5 blocks per game, and earning all NBA first-team honors. His defensive contributions ensured that he was elected to the NBA All-Defensive Second Team and was also named NBA Rookie of the Year, having won the NBA Rookie of the Month award every single month that season. Spurs coach Greg Popovich lauded Duncan's mental toughness, stating his rookie's demeanor was singularly remarkable and never got too upbeat or too depressed. Center Robinson was equally impressed with Duncan. "He's the real thing. I'm proud of his attitude and effort. He gives all the extra effort and work and wants to become a better player." In his sophomore season, Duncan gave us more of the same production-wise as he averaged 21.7 points, 11.4 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks per game on 49.5% shooting. Leader of the Spurs. Before the 2003-04 season began, the Spurs lost their perennial captain David Robinson to retirement. Embracing the lone team leader role, Duncan led a reformed Spurs team which included Slovenian center Rašu Nestorovic, defensive stalwart Bruce Bowen, Argentinian shooting guard Ginobili, and young French point guard Parker. Coming off the bench were clutch shooting power forward Robert Ari, versatile Hedo Turkoglu, and veterans Malik Rose and Kevin Willis. In retrospect, Robinson commented that at first, Duncan was reluctant to step into the void, still needing some time to truly develop his leadership skills. Statistically, though, Duncan remained strong. After another convincing season with averages of 22.3 points, 12.4 rebounds, 3.1 assists, and 2.7 blocks, he led the Spurs into the Western Conference semifinals. There, they met the Los Angeles Lakers again, split the series 2-2, and in Game 5, Duncan made a toughly defended jump shot which put the Spurs ahead by 1 point with 0.4 seconds left to play. Despite the little time remaining, Lakers point guard Derek Fisher hit a buzzer beater, giving his team the win. In the end, the Spurs lost the series 4-2, and Duncan attributed the strong Lakers defense as one of the reasons for the loss. Duncan and his Spurs looked to reassert themselves in the next 2004-05 season. Despite their new captain's slight statistical slump, 20.3 points, 11.1 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 2.6 blocks per game, the Spurs won the second seed for the 2005 NBA playoffs by winning 59 games. Spurs met the Seattle Supersonics in the semifinals. After splitting the first 4 games, Duncan led his team to 2 decisive victories, setting up a meeting with the Phoenix Suns, known for their up-tempo basketball. The Spurs managed to beat the Suns at their own game, defeating them 4-1 and earning a spot in the 2005 NBA Finals against the Detroit Pistons. In the finals, Duncan was pitted against Detroit's defensively strong frontcourt anchored by multiple NBA Defensive Player of the Year Ben Wallace. After two convincing Game 1 and 2 wins for the Spurs, the Pistons double-teamed Duncan and forced him to play further from the basket. Detroit won the next two games and the series was eventually tied at 3-3, but Duncan was instrumental in Game 7, recording 25 points and 11 rebounds as the Spurs defeated the Pistons. Coach Popovich added, "Duncan's complete game is so sound, so fundamental, so unnoticed at times, because if he didn't score, people think, well, he didn't do anything. But he was incredible and he was the force that got it done for us." Pistons center Ben Wallace remarked, "He put his team on his shoulders and carried them to a championship. That's what the great players do." Duncan won his third NBA Finals MVP award, joining Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, and Magic Johnson as the only players in NBA history to win it 3 times. Tim Duncan had a perfect career and is arguably the best power forward of all time. Unless you consider LeBron a power forward or Duncan a center, he played the majority of his minutes at center. Then Duncan is the undisputed greatest 4 of all time. But people don't really think about power forwards as leading teams to championships with a few exceptions, being a 5-time NBA champion, 15-time All-Star selection, 15-time All-NBA selection, 15-time All-Defensive Team selection, and a member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Duncan literally did it all on the court as a dominant forward for the Spurs. If that isn't enough, the veteran big man was also the 1997-98 NBA Rookie of the Year, a member of the 1997-98 NBA All-Rookie Team, the 1999-00 All-Star Game MVP, a 2-time League MVP, and a 3-time NBA Finals MVP. But despite all these achievements, he is heavily underrated and we are going to explain why. Why Tim Duncan is heavily underrated despite being the greatest at his position, the 5 reasons why. 1. Not a fancy player. One of the main reasons behind it was that Tim was such a quiet and reserved personality. His game was very effective but he was boring, he lacked a lot of flair and flashiness of the other greats. He was never one to show off and fill the highlights. He just played the game with little to no flash. He wasn't out there dunking on people or doing crazy athletic maneuvers. He was just out there doing fundamentals. He was just fundamentally sound. It was his playing style that made him not a topic to talk about when it comes to the greatest players of all time. 2. Tim won a lot. One of the main reasons Tim is underrated is that he won a lot. Go back and watch any Spurs game in the last 6 to 8 years of Timmy's career and you'll see what I mean. There were many times that he would foul and be called for it and he would pull the who me? And complain about not fouling or knowing why a foul was called on him. In San Antonio, the fans had a running joke that Tim was the only player in NBA history who never committed a foul. 3. Never successfully defended a championship. What's harder than winning an NBA title? Winning it again the following season when everyone is gunning for you. Until the Spurs' 5th Larry O'Brien Trophy in 2014, the running gag was they only could win the championship in odd-numbered years. San Antonio never even defended any Western Conference title until 2014, late in Duncan's career. Sure, there were some extenuating circumstances, Duncan's injury in 2000, Derek Fisher's 0.4 shot in 2004. But there were other opportunities for Duncan and the Spurs, and they couldn't quite do it. Of course, many would point out that the Spurs caught some breaks in their championship runs, shit leaving Ari wide open in 2005, Phoenix losing key players to suspensions in 2007. Maybe it all evened out in the end. 4. Greg Popovich. They won 1001 games together, but who made who? This is like the Tom Brady/Bill Belichick chicken or egg thing. Popovich, who has more basketball knowledge in his little toe than most people do in their whole bodies, would undoubtedly say Duncan was the straw that stirred the drink, and I do agree with that. But let's not sell Pop short either. While Duncan was the constant, Pop had to coach a revolving cast of supporting players, from Hall of Famer David Robinson to the duo of Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, to rising star Kawhi Leonard. So we can say that the role of Greg Popovich somehow overshadowed Timmy's role. 5. Disappointments with the national team. In 1998, Duncan was selected as one of the last 2 players for the United States national team for the World Basketball Championship. However, this team was later replaced with CBA and college players because of the NBA lockout. Duncan's first chance at playing for the national team came in 1999 when he was called up to the Olympic qualifying team. He averaged 12.7 points per game, 9.1 rebounds per game, and 2.4 blocks per game and led the team to a 10-0 finish en route to a qualifying berth for the 2000 Sydney Olympics, but a knee injury forced him to stay out of the Olympic Games themselves. At the 2004 Summer Olympics, the team lost 3 games on its way to a bronze medal. The record represented more losses in a single year than in the 68 previous years combined. It was also the first time since NBA players became eligible that the U.S. men's basketball team returned home without gold medals at the Olympics. After the tournament, Duncan commented, "I am about 95% sure my FIBA career is over. I'll try not to share my experiences with anyone." In total, Duncan was a member of 5 USA basketball teams and played in 40 games. Now if I ask you who is the GOAT, obviously the majority will say Michael Jordan. But what if I tell you that in terms of winning consistency, Tim Duncan has a clear advantage even over Michael Jordan? Duncan has more rings than any of the superstars/all-stars after Michael Jordan. He has more rings than Kobe, 5, Shaq, 4, and LeBron, 4. Duncan leaves the game as the most universally respected basketball player of his generation. He's the only player in history to win a title in 3 different decades as a starter. He belongs in the top 5 or 6 of anyone's all-time historical list. Young children currently learning about the game won't be able to value Duncan's impact on the sport, but hopefully, they'll view him in the same light we still view Bill Russell today. Every time we talk about who was the best player of all time, Tim Duncan should be on that argument. But for Tim Duncan, he preferred to do it his way without the glamour, facade, and theatrics that most of the modern players and fans have been accustomed to. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe down below. Until next time.